And you look at a player like Marta, she's been there for all of it. She cares. Orlando wants to be respected as the best team in the league and not sort of a flash in the pan best team in the league this year type thing. They want to be treated like a team that has turned things around. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Monday, July 8th, and we are at an inflection point. The NWSL regular season has finished until after the Olympics. The WNBA is only 1 week away from doing that themselves. Very excited to dig into where each league is as eyes turn to Paris. All right, so starting this week off with NWSL chatter. What a weekend for the NWSL. It was the final weekend before the league takes some time off of the regular season for the Olympics. There will be the NWSL and Liga MX Femenil Summer Cup during that time, but the NWSL regular season is not returning until the third week of August. So we're taking kind of a big picture look at what the landscape is here going into this break. It's significant. I think coaches talk about this all the time. GMs do, players do, about how these major tournament years are very segmented in the NWSL to the fact that it is a summer league. We're going to see new signings coming into the league after the Olympics. There's going to be kind of a changed landscape. But let's talk about this snapshot that we're in right now because it was a pretty exciting weekend. I do think we just kind of have to start with the blockbuster match of the week, which was Orlando and Kansas City, the battle of the unbeatens. They were tied at the top of the table. They were both fostering these historic unbeaten streaks for the regular season. Orlando had been coming off of that great winning streak before kind of extending their unbeaten streak. Fabulous game. It was a game in Kansas City, which has been announced officially now as the host of the championship site this year. CPKC Stadium was rocking. It was a beautiful day, very nice sunny day in Kansas City. You know, I will go on record and say I was wrong. I've been saying all season that I did not think that Kansas City was going to lose a game at home this year, but Orlando said, watch me. So this game had just about everything. There were 2 goals from the Golden Boot leaders, Barbara Banda and Temwa Chawinga. There was a red card before halftime. There was a Marta penalty. There was just Marta in general being about as fired up as she could possibly be about this game. It was a very physical game, very, very physical, and it was reffed kind of tight. And so I think those 2 things happening at the same time maybe gave a sense of uneasiness. And I think maybe both fan bases walked away from the game being like, that could have gone better, but started out as a very physical game. There were a lot of yellow cards given out. There was obviously that one. There were 2 yellows given out to Carrie Lawrence, who did get a red card at the end of the first half. But it was just so clear from the very beginning how personally both of these teams were taking this game. And I do think that's an important note to make for a number of reasons. Reason number 1 being that, yes, this was the last game for these 2 teams before the Olympics, and there were a lot of Olympians in these 2 sides. Now, interestingly enough, not U.S. women's national team players, but a lot of Brazil players. Obviously, you have Barbara Banda, who will be going to the Olympics for Zambia. You had a number of players here who were thinking about the Olympics probably. We saw actually a couple of players this weekend maybe play at like 65, 75, 80% as they think about fitness going into a tournament like the Olympics. I think that's fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think protecting your mental and physical health going into a tournament like that is super fine. But that was not how this game was played. This game was played like this was the Olympics. It was played like this was the Super Bowl. And it was just a regular season game, mid-season regular season game in Kansas City, which was exciting. It was dramatic. But I think it's also, again, notable and perhaps well contextualized in the history of these 2 teams. We'll talk about this actually about the end of the game where there was a little bit of maybe sportsmanship or I think Kansas City maybe walked away feeling like Orlando celebrated this win a little bit too hard. But these 2 teams really care about where they stand at the top of the table. Beyond just sort of that week to week, or you want to be in the mix for the Shield, you want to be in the mix for these top playoff seeds, for these positions in the playoffs, the postseason. I think everybody knows that an NWSL championship game is still king. Teams take a little bit more seriously the gravitas of winning an NWSL championship end of postseason than they do perhaps a Shield win, though a Shield is arguably the best way to determine who the best team was over the course of a season. But of course these 2 teams took this seriously, right? Of course the Orlando Pride care about the fact that they have not lost a single game this season. This is a team that has only made the playoffs once in their club history. They've had some historically poor seasons in the past. And you look at a player like Marta, she's been there for all of it. She cares. Orlando wants to be respected as the best team in the league and not sort of a flash in the pan best team in the league this year type thing. They want to be treated like a team that has turned things around. Now you talk about Kansas City. Kansas City not only takes great pride in their turnaround from last season where they had a very rough season, but they take a lot of pride in playing at home. The Kansas City Current take very seriously what it means to play at that CBKC Stadium, what it means to play in front of those fans for a team that if you remember, they were FC Kansas City and they did not have the fan support in Kansas City that they were looking for. They go to Utah. The team folds in Kansas City. They go to Utah. They come back. They're given this new lease on life, and suddenly they are treated like one of the premier sport teams in the entire city. They take that seriously, and they want to win for those fans and for themselves. Was not surprised by how passionate this game played out at all. And I think it's a testament to the NWSL, to those players, and to kind of that parity that you see throughout the league all season, that these teams really, really wanted to get this one. It also maybe speaks again to how the season has shaken up so far, that this felt significant in the standings. In a much tighter season where there was less separation maybe between that top 5 and the rest of the league, you maybe take a game like this and you go, okay, brush this one off, we move on. But with how well both Kansas City and Orlando have been playing, there was this feeling of like, I don't know how many games they're going to lose this season. I don't necessarily have an expectation that Orlando is never going to lose again, but how many realistically are they going to drop? I think that's a fair question. This game matters. So how it plays out, like I said, it's very physical. Marta, I think, feels at the very beginning like she's being targeted a little bit. There were some sort of choppy calls there. You saw Temwa Chawinga get a couple choppy calls. I mean, Chawinga basically drew that red card from Carrie Lawrence. Barbara Banda scores first. Chawinga answers immediately. Orlando goes down to 10 players before the half. And so at the half, you're 1-1. Orlando's down to 10. You think, oh, man, this was going to be such a good game. And now Orlando is limited by this call. Not the wrong call, I don't think, at all. Both of those challenges were absolutely yellow card worthy. But you are just like, okay, in terms of the universe, it's kind of a bummer that Orlando has gone down to 10 players here. This is going to make it too easy for Kansas City to come back and win this game. Again, win at home. They don't lose at home very often. But this game also did just solidify for me my belief that Seb Hines should be the front runner for NWSL Coach of the Year, because I think if you want to talk about the differences between that second half, I think the difference came into the coaching more than anything. When Orlando went down to 10 at the end of the first half, you could see the organization get very flustered. They made like the obvious defensive sub. What happens when you have a defender go out on a red card is you have to make a quick defensive sub. You have to make your backline whole, and you pull an attacking player to make that happen. They do that. They have Rafael come in for Julie Doyle. But the midfield shape was all out of whack. I don't think they knew exactly who was supposed to be where in the attack until they get to halftime. They looked flustered. It looked like this was going to turn the tide. This was going to kind of be that wave that Kansas City can follow to victory, to a result. But then at halftime, Hines regroups, puts the Pride basically into sort of this Christmas tree 4-3-2, very defensively sturdy. Though I do think they did an okay job of opening things up. It did not seem like they were just trying to hold on to a lead, or once they got that penalty kick. Obviously, they earned that PK while down a player. They did intend to attack, which is what you have to do when you have a player like Banda at your disposal. But they saw out the rest of this match. It was a yellow card offense on AD Franch in the box. That turns into the PK. Marta takes the PK. They take a 2-1 lead. And the Orlando defense rendered, again, remember the coach on the other sideline here, or on the other coach's box, is Vlatko Andonovski, who we've praised a lot this season so far in what he's been able to do for Kansas City. He's an excellent club coach. But we saw a little bit of that U.S. Women's National Team, Vlatko Andonovski, in this game at the end. He brings a tall defender on to be kind of a target in the air, sort of a forward. It's sort of a last-ditch attempt in the last 15 minutes to get a result out of this game. Consequently, the Current start lobbing hopeful crosses into the box over and over and over again. They're rendered very predictable. They're not moving the ball well on the ground. Now, I want to note that Kansas City was missing definitely a few playmakers. They were missing Vanessa DiBernardo. They were missing Bia Zenerato. but they had enough creative talent on the field to find an equalizer at home if they had kept the ball on the ground and they had kept kind of trusting that process that opened things up. I mean, obviously, Orlando was very compact. Without a player, again, specifically like DiBernardo, it's very, very hard to break those lines once you have a team get set in so well. And as we know, Orlando's defense does not give up very many goals. But Andonovski kind of went into that mode of, it's fine, we're going to get the ball in the air, we're going to move the ball quickly from the defense, we're going to have the defense send long balls out to the wings, and the wings will send these hopeful crosses in, and we will get something in the air. It's low efficiency chances. Congratulations to Hines for pushing Andonovski into that mode. And I think it's just kind of an interesting data point, especially once we move into the second half of the season when Kansas City will certainly, I think, be in the postseason picture. What does that look like for a playoff game for Kansas City? How do they manage those late game moments? And I'm sure they will also try to learn from this. You probably shouldn't go so predictable as they did in the attack. And I think that's a learning for Andonovski to have sort of that float up for the first time, I think, this season. And also for the players themselves to keep trusting the process a little bit more. And hopefully they will be at full strength later in the season. And then, like I said, the post game was kind of spicy. I mean, let's talk about this, right? Like, Marta was really on one. She gets subbed off late in the match. She has an ice pack on her leg that she kind of flings off with a high kick after final whistle. She does sling. There's a video on the Orlando Pride Twitter page that shows her slinging an F-bomb at the crowd. She was doing kind of her own version of like the Casey baby hand motion. It was a lot. It was pointed. It was very, very pointed. Michelle Cooper of Kansas City, she posted something after the game that was a little bit like, I think, we'll see you in September. We noticed how you guys celebrated this. We noticed how you acted when the cameras were off. I think that, again, any particular player feeling aggrieved was probably both warranted and also a little bit over the top, because I think both players on both sides of the game had their own issues with being fouled. And that played a factor too. The ref playing the game as tight as he did, or calling the game as tight as he did affect the ability for Kansas City to chase. They were not given a lot of chances to play physically in front of Orlando's goal at the end. The Current, again, they have a lot of pride in the way they play at home. They have a lot of pride of playing in front of their fans. Ironically, not Orlando pride, but they have a lot. They're very proud of how they play in front of their fans at home. And Orlando really celebrated, really celebrated this. And so I think there's going to be some spicy vibes in September. There's going to be one more regular season game between these two teams. It's going to be in Orlando. And who knows? Maybe they meet again in the postseason. Maybe they meet again in the postseason in Orlando or in Kansas City. Who's to say? I liked it. I liked the passion. Like I said, you go into this game right before an Olympic break, and these teams could have been sleepwalking. And that didn't happen. And I think that is a testament to both groups. I don't think Kansas City should take this one on the chin too much, though, like I said, some interesting sort of eyebrow raisers, maybe specifically for Andonovski and his approach late game. But sometimes you win some and sometimes you lose some. So fascinated for this to be sort of the taste in everyone's mouth going into this break, because the Summer Cup will be fabulous, but it's not exactly the same as regular season competition, which I know everyone is taking very seriously. But kind of speaking of Olympic ripples, we're going to do kind of a speed run here of talking about some of the other stuff that happened in the league. There were a lot of Olympic level performances from individuals. I mean, Banda is going to the Olympics. Marta is going to the Olympics. Mallory Swanson for Chicago had possibly the goal of the weekend with her increasingly strong left foot. That's one to watch when we analyze the U.S. She plays on the left for the U.S. She kind of floats a little bit more for Chicago, but she's been favoring that left foot coming back from injury. I just think it's fascinating how she's developed that in her time kind of coming back to the field. Rose Lavelle scored a very nice goal for Gotham. Her goal production has to be something that both club and country are very happy about. She has really kind of warmed into the season nicely and has gone from, I think everybody remembers even on this show, just sort of question marks of where she fits for Gotham, where she fits for the U.S., making herself look increasingly starter level with every game that she gets. Thought it was notable that Trinity Rodman scored from the spot this week. She doesn't take those very often, but really good practice going into what's going to be a tight international competition. You want to get as many reps from the penalty spot as you possibly can. So a lot of really good moments kind of showcasing NWSL Olympic talent, even if not every result went the way of each player on these teams. But in terms of the larger standings, the trends are about the same. I think we should feel pretty good about where Orlando, Kansas City, Washington, and Gotham are. Feel very comfy. Portland and North Carolina, similarly, kind of maybe look a step off from those top four right now, but certainly playoff teams. I think Chicago has actually given us some good stuff in the last couple of weeks. They just announced today that they are also signing international midfielder, Canadian midfielder Julia Grosso, which is further stabilize that midfield. I think with that piece, we can probably start talking about Chicago seriously as a playoff team. But I think 8th is wide open. BFC currently holds it despite a loss this weekend. No one outside the top 8 has won a game in their last 3 matches, but there are only 2 points between 8th and 9th. I think that should tell you kind of everything you need to know about the bottom of the table this year. You're seeing a lot of opportunities missed to create separation, and you're seeing some of that, the pieces putting it all together, rising to the top. And I think we've had just some really notable drop-offs. I think, the wave, we haven't, I think, had a chance to talk on this show at length about the sacking of Casey Stoney, which was very abrupt, and the team has had 2 losses since. Felt like a very abrupt choice, maybe a little bit rash, a little bit harsh. San Diego is further embroiled in some controversy. Jill Ellis and the club both responded to allegations of a toxic workplace from a former employee. It just seems like there are a lot of questions in San Diego right now that are being placed on the shoulders of the players without a ton of leadership above them. And then also just seeing a championship runner-up like Seattle struggle as much as they had. They did get a draw this week, but they get a draw against Utah, who is in last place in the league. Not an entirely successful offseason in terms of acquisitions, probably delayed by the team's sale, which did finally go through. But you need some teams to drop off for other teams to rise. And I think we're seeing pretty significant dips for some clubs this season as well. But yeah, I think this is just a good place to leave the NWSL. Fabulous game at the top of the table to leave it. 6 of the top 8 teams ended this weekend on a win. Like I said, you're seeing that separation. Apologies for Kansas City for being the highest executing team to not get a win this weekend, but sometimes that's how it goes. And then, yeah, you're going to see some more signings. There have been some signings that have been announced that will not go through until after the Olympics. You're going to see these teams make follow-up transfer decisions to be able to shore up their playoff bids. You're going to see players return from the Olympics in varying states of fitness. We always see that. You always watch the players that play a lot in the Olympics, but you also have to be very careful of the players who do not play very much in the Olympics. Sometimes they come back and have to keep building that fitness. But yeah, things turn internationally now. So the U.S. Women's National Team will have 2 send-off games, one this weekend and one next week, one against Mexico, one against Costa Rica with the Olympic 18. It'll be those final looks of how players are fitting in together before they move off to the Olympics. And we're going to have some good previews coming up. I think everyone stay tuned for our Olympic content. I'm really excited about it as we turn to sort of the big stage of 2024. So now turning over to the WNBA, who are also hurtling towards their own Olympic break. No Summer Cup for the WNBA. They're not doing any of their own international competition. They do an actual break for the Olympics. They will play the regular season through July 17th. Then there will be the All-Star game the following weekend between Team WNBA and Team USA. Then the Olympics, and then the WNBA regular season returns on August 15th. I like the Olympic break a lot. I understand why the NWSL doesn't prefer it. The NWSL season, they don't play as many games as the WNBA. They like to lengthen their season. They have that lengthy postseason. I get why they don't want to lose sort of their place in the national consciousness during the Olympics, but I also think the Olympic break is a fascinating part of the WNBA season every 4 years, because this is the time when some of these teams that don't have that many Olympians or are younger or have new coaches get to cook a little bit. They just get to grind in the gym every single day. They get practice that they didn't necessarily get at the beginning of the season. And sometimes what you see at the end of an Olympic break isn't quite what you see at the beginning. As people might recall, 3 years ago, 2021, the last Olympics, the Chicago Sky were like this middling team going into the Olympic break, and they turn it around during the Olympic break, and they ride that all the way to a championship. Now, do I think that will necessarily happen this year? I don't know. We're seeing some very clear lines being drawn about who is established at the top of the WNBA table, but I just like the construct. I think it's really interesting and only happens once every 4 years. But I think also what we saw this week in terms of the WNBA kind of highlights the difference between the micro and the macro of where the league is this season right now. You're not seeing a ton of movement in the top 5 teams in terms of standings or record. The Liberty and Connecticut, top of the table, Minnesota, and then Seattle. Vegas has kind of made this surge, but they did drop one game this weekend, and then Phoenix right behind Vegas. Indiana and Chicago are barely holding on to those last 2 playoff spots for now. You saw Atlanta slip a little bit. Dallas started to feel like they were in a bit of a free fall, but they did get a couple nice wins in the last couple weeks. So we'll see. Dallas has been dealing with a lot of injuries. Fascinated to see if they're able to pull things together post-Olympic break, if they're able to get healthy. That would be my dark horse team for the big surge, perhaps into the playoff picture, despite being last in the league right now. But in terms of the micro, a lot of really interesting stuff. The Sparks took a game off the Aces. The Fever beat the Liberty for the first time this season. The Sky split. They're back-to-back with Seattle. I'm not sure anybody expected that. Game by game, there are still some really interesting individual results despite these steady trends, perhaps, of that lift of certain teams or certain teams struggling. But I think maybe the best way to look at what we're seeing right now, again, is we're going into this final week of regular season games. The All-Star game happens right after that. We've had the All-Star teams announced. Let's talk about the individual performances in that Olympic lens and also in that All-Star game lens. Like I said, it's going to be Team USA versus Team WNBA, but both of these teams have players that are excelling so much on the court. I think this is a good way to talk about what players are really playing very, very well going into their Olympic process, and also what players are playing quite well as they go into a chance to practice, or maybe it cuts momentum, right? So let's start with Team WNBA, and we're actually just going to start with the rookies. There are 2 rookies who were named to the All-Star team this year. I'm sure you know them, you love them, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And they've arguably elevated their games since finding out that they were named to the All-Star team in their rookie season. Caitlin Clark became the first rookie in WNBA history this week to record a triple-double with 19 points, 13 assists, and 12 rebounds in that win over New York. She's been very, very close to a triple-double a couple of times. I think a lot of people kind of note those stats of the almost triple-double, right? She's been very close to that. We're seeing, really nice generational stuff from Clark. As Indiana has started to find their footing, it's kind of been 1-to-1 this week, I think, in terms of wins and losses, but we're seeing some nice play from them, and we're especially seeing some nice play from Clark, who I think is truly beginning to grow into the physicality of the league to be able to control her own destiny a little bit more. Angel Reese for Chicago has kept pace. She broke Candace Parker's record for all-time longest double-double streak on Sunday with 17 points and 14 rebounds. That's 13 straight double-doubles. I love enveloping a record all into 1 year. So to be clear, Reese had already broken the single-season double-double streak record. This is now all-time because Parker got her 13 over 2 separate seasons. So now the all-time record is also the single-season record, and Angel Reese holds both. Reese also right now is leading the league in rebounds. She's first in offensive rebounds and 6th in defensive rebounds, and she's averaging a double-double per game. And her rebound average is actually right now, if she maintains her rebound average, it'll be one of the top 5 rebound averages in league history. Just very impressive from these 2 players. Clark leads all rookies in scoring. She only trails Alyssa Thomas in assists per game league-wide. Both of these players that deserve their all-star bids, but they're also just having a historically good season as rookies. But you move on, you expand, right, to the rest of Team WNBA. We're looking again at that Rookie of the Year race, I think, between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, but I do kind of like contextualizing them as kind of all-star teammates. Like, yeah, they're peers. They both deserve to be in this conversation. They're going to be battling each other on the court for both individual accolades and for wins, but just really, really nice. I like to look at, I think, the rookie class a little bit more holistically, because I think that when this season is over, people will remember, right? They're going to remember Reese versus Clark. They're going to remember 2 very different kinds of players having historically good seasons as rookies, and what that ultimately comes to in a Rookie of the Year debate. But I think when time passes, what's going to also just be remembered is that this is just going to be a very impactful rookie class for a long time. And I think the longer this season goes, the clearer that becomes. But again, you move on to the non-rookies, right? De'Erica Hamby is averaging 19 points and 10 rebounds. Arike Ogunbowale is averaging 23 points per game. Caitlin McBride is 3rd in 3-pointers made league-wide. Jonquel Jones has the league highest field goal percentage. The list goes on and on. Team WNBA, I think sometimes when you look at the construct of Team USA versus Team WNBA for an all-star game, you go, oh, well, you're going to have some sneaks, right? You're going to have some sneaks on Team USA. You're going to have who maybe wouldn't get voted for All-Star otherwise. You're going to have some sneaks on Team WNBA who have a full team to fill out. But I think what we're actually seeing is that this is a really good list of 2 teams, and these players are playing really well. You could even take one step further from that and talk about how some of the All-Star snubs played this week, right? Kennedy Carter has been a force for Chicago. She's like by far the highest field goal percentage in the paint for a guard this season. She's excelling on scoring. She's starting for the team now. Kennedy Carter has been really, really good. I find it interesting that she was not made to this All-Star team. Perhaps the move to starter just came a little bit too late. Ezzy Magbagor is a huge snub for WNBA All-Star. She's a Defensive Player of the Year frontrunner, has been playing very, very well for Seattle. You could even look at Dejanay Carrington for Connecticut, frontrunner for perhaps Most Improved Player. A lot of these players actually, you talk about sort of the things that spur you on during this sort of grind mode part of the season. An all-star snub or an all-star placement could do that for you, and we're seeing that in Team WNBA. You look at all of that stuff, you go, yeah, unbeatable team. But look at how Team USA is playing. And I think this is, again, that we talk about it in soccer all the time, but this is good stuff going into an Olympics. A'ja Wilson is playing like an athlete possessed. She leaves the WNBA in points and blocks per game. She's second in rebounds and fifth in steals. She scored 540 total points this season, the most by any player over a single season 20-game span in WNBA history. She, to me, is by far the MVP frontrunner. She has taken her game to a new level, and I think she has to be the centerpiece of Team USA going into the Olympics. But you're also seeing other players, again, that boost, that idea of maybe once you get named to an Olympic team, that gives you that motivation. Kalia Copper is producing at a level she never has before. I think Sabrina Ionescu is absolutely having the best season of her young career. Alyssa Thomas registered another triple-double this week. She's going into her first Olympics, and her consistency is ridiculous. Napheesa Collier has been an all-around player in scoring and rebounding for Minnesota this year. And again, I just think when you talk about win share and how Minnesota has been able to craft a team around her, that is someone that you want playing heavy minutes during the Olympics. And she also knows their coach very well, because Minnesota's coach, Cheryl Reeve, is also the coach for Team USA. They are deep. And I think people have to feel really, really good about how some of that core of that Olympic team is playing going into the Olympics. Now, the only concern, perhaps injury-wise, I think there are two. One name that is missing from all of these lists, whether we're talking about Team WNBA or Team USA, is Ryan Howard, who is I do think at this point genuinely an injury concern going into the 3v3 basketball Olympic event. She has not played with an ankle sprain in recent weeks. She is the kind of player that if she was at the height of her powers, she certainly would be a WNBA All-Star. She's been very consistent. She is the star for the Atlanta Dream. Very good player. I'm sure everyone is hoping she's returning sooner rather than later. I do not think that Chelsea Gray at this point is in that mix for injury concerns. She's been very consistently building her minutes. She's been playing very well. Same thing for Brittany Griner, who is coming off of an early injury, but she's been getting very consistent minutes with Phoenix. So some of those concerns when the Olympic team was named, those have gone away. But there's a new one that people should probably keep an eye on, which is that Napheesa Collier, who I mentioned is just playing very, very well for Minnesota, has recently been managing a plantar fascia issue, which is something that, again, USA and Minnesota coach Cheryl Reeve says that she doesn't think is going to be a huge issue for the Olympics. But as people know, plantar fascia can be chronic. You can have good days, you can have bad days. That is probably something that they're going to have to manage throughout the Olympic tournament. It's not something that you can just fix right away. So I'm curious to see, for example, if a player like Collier plays in the All-Star game, that might be a game that she could miss if she needed to do some load management. But we'll see. So yeah, in terms of injury concerns, I think actually everyone should feel pretty good about where Team USA is at. Dearica Amby replaced Cameron Brink on that 3v3 team. She's playing very, very well. That is absolutely the player you want to come in terms of you have to deal with an injury. But yeah, Ryan Howard, I think, is a question mark. Not to play, but just where is she going to be at in terms of fitness and on-court fitness by the time she's able to get back to the 3v3 team? And then what is Collier going to do? Is Collier going to be limited in terms of minutes, perhaps, or efficiency? We will see. But yeah, there's still a week of WNBA games to be played. But things are starting to settle in. We have not seen a ton of movement again in terms of the standings. We keep waiting for the Aces to make a surge. Maybe that happens after the Olympics. They do have a lot of Olympians, so that could also affect their ability to I guess, maintain that fitness going into the rest of the season. And what those other teams on the bubble that are going to be cooking in the gym. But I'm really excited to see what the league looks like after the break, especially looking at how players play in the Olympics. And I actually think that this All-Star game has a little bit of juice because, like I said, Team WNBA playing very, very well. So that has been this week's edition of The Late Sub, keeping it short and sweet this week. But I think this is a good place to kind of wrap up NWSL and WNBA for a little bit as we turn to the Olympics. Excited to dig into a lot of different stuff in the upcoming weeks. I have been your host, Claire Watkins. Shout out to producer extraordinaire Parker Fenton. Be sure to subscribe to the Just Women's Sports YouTube channel going into the Olympics. We have full interviews with Allie Watt and Haley Carter that we did last week through the Orlando Pride. We have more really exciting interview and show content coming up on that channel. So be sure to subscribe going forward, and we will see y'all next week.